So how do you change the dialogue of your story? The first point about dialogue is that you have to make it true to the genre you're writing about. If you're writing an 18th century historical fiction novel, then you cannot put colloquial modern catchphrases in the story. Rather, the dialogue has to actually comply with the genre you're writing in. So the first thing that you need to do is effectively research what that dialogue looked like, something you should have done back in the outline or pre-outline stage of developing your story. But as you revise, you need to reanalyze what true dialogue actually looks like. And this is where you do effectively look a little bit at grammar and spelling as well. Revising your story is a lot more than grammar and spelling, but of course your grammar and spelling needs to be correct. And your speech that the main characters and all the characters use needs to be correct for that character in that place, in that time period. So if you have a main character that purposely speaks bad grammar, you can put that into your story, but you need to really show your audience that this is the exception and not the norm by a lot of other characters speaking correct grammar for that time period. And this is where, as an author, you can even enter in just a little bit of your own narrative inflections in the dialogue of your main characters. How would you phrase something if you lived in that time period or in that genre or place? How would you say something, and how can you make that influence just a little bit what that character is effectively saying? Dialogue tags are also a very important part to consider in the dialogue of your story. If you've already described something one of your characters are doing, let's say you have a character named John in your story, and John just picked up a sword. If you've said John's fingers clasped the sword, then you don't have to put he said or said he at the end of the dialogue if he says something as he picks up the sword. The reader's obviously going to know that John is the one speaking since he's the one that just picked up the sword, and it's all in the same paragraph. I've found that the following rules sound generally the best. If the tag comes at the very end of the dialogue, then put said he or said she instead of he said or she said. If the tag comes in the middle of the dialogue, like pick up the sword, dialogue tag, and mount the horse, I find it better to say he said or she said. So pick up the sword, he said, and mount the horse. Just a little tip that I found to be the most aesthetically pleasing from various stories that I loved, that I had read, and then that I incorporated in my own stories. Ultimately, you're in charge of your dialogue, and you're in charge of the mood that each character poses when they speak. However, I think it's important to keep the dialogue